There was one particular youth that was pretty striking and handsome, and he challenged us all to give our best. I don't know his name, but he's a good-looking kid. Hey, when we designed this year, this is the I'm in year, and the idea is we don't want to just be committed to God. We want to be fully devoted to Him. We want to be all in. We put together a Bible reading plan, and a lot of you are going through that, and you're reading the different books of the Bible as they come. And when we decided this was going to be our celebration for all our graduates, this was only decided like a couple of months ago. Nobody even looked in here. We didn't even check out what was it we would actually be talking about on this Sunday morning. What was it that we would be reading this week coming into this Sunday? So on this very encouraging day where our graduates are being promoted on and encouraged, we read about Job. And many of you know Job is a very, very sad, very, very dark, very depressing book in the Bible. So I guess my message to you graduates today is this. Life is hard, full of disappointment, sometimes completely unfair. Good luck. Woo. And some of you are nervously laughing because you know it's true. All right, so seriously, we struggled over this, or I did anyway. I'm looking at that thinking, maybe we should change the date. Graduation for some or not till a couple of weeks. Or maybe we should change the Bible passage and just talk about something uplifting and positive. And then it kind of hit me, maybe this is exactly what God wants us to talk about. So I read through Job, and I'm like, yeah, there's something there. We need to talk about this. So let's get there. It's something not just for our grads. All of us need to hear this. But to help me out to tell the story of Job, I ask a volunteer. Where's Annie at? Annie, come on up here. Everybody give Annie a round of applause. She's going to help us out. Woo-hoo. Annie, you get to play the role of Job, this incredibly blessed man, but I don't want you to worry. Nobody here believes you're a man. Okay. I'm basing that on a huge assumption. Nobody believes you're a man. Okay. Also, Job, he had this incredible family. He had like 7 sons and 2 daughters. Don't worry, nobody here believes that you have children. All right. You're starting to wonder, why did I pick Annie, right? All right, and Job also, he was righteous, blameless. This guy was such a good man. Don't worry, Annie, nobody here actually thinks that you... Of course they do. Of course they do. That's why I picked you. That's why, because Annie, right? I mean, of all the people in our youth group, Annie's it, right? Would you agree? Yeah. Now you're going to leave with this massive head, right? You're going to go down. All right. So to demonstrate Job's life, I want to do some stuff. I want to actually try to physically demonstrate that. Job had like all of this cattle and all this land, and so I imagine his table was filled with all this food, right? So what I'd like to do, I don't have any food for you, but what I do have, there's something in my house that I have a lot of, and it's candy. I mean, we yeah. So here's what I'm going to do for you, Annie. I got right here I got you this big bowl of M&Ms. You like M&Ms? Oh, good. Because if you didn't like M&Ms, I've got lots of candy. All right. So I stole this from Angie's candy cabinet. It used to be a candy drawer, but it has grown through the entire cabinet. You open a drawer, it's stuffed. You open another drawer, it's stuffed, and it's growing. It's like bunnies in the drawer. And so we got all this candy, and so that represents the blessing of food. Does that work for you? Is there a kind of candy you like in here better than the M&Ms? All right, dig in. Those are yours. This is cool. He was also a very wealthy man, and so I thought maybe I should demonstrate wealth to you. Now, I'm not a wealthy man, so all I have is a bunch of $1 bills. Are you okay with that if I give you these? Yeah? Who am I kidding? You are actually, there you go. You are going into college. You're going to have all this college debt, so you might want to save that. No. Actually, all that's going to do is help feed that Starbucks addiction you will get in college. Okay. All right, so also he was comfortable. I mean, come on, he has wealth, he has family, he's in joy, he's in peace. And so I thought through and I thought, comfort, a pillow represents comfort. So here you go, just put that behind you, get nice and comfortable. Nice and comfortable. All right, is that nice? Good. I wish this is where the story ended, but it doesn't. The story goes on from here and it turns tragic. So what happens is, have you read through Job? Do you know what happens next? You don't? Why don't you take another M&M there before I tell you what happens next? I'm actually surprised you haven't finished that bowl yet. Ange would have been on to the junior mints by now. All right, so what happens next is he just loses all his cattle, he loses all of his crops. It just goes away. It's gone. Yeah, and he lost all his wealth. And he lost all of his family, and he lost everything. Just gone. In fact, it got so bad that Job had to actually put ashes on him to try to cover up the sores that got on his body, because he just began to be in agony and torture, and it was just awful. So I'm going to have to ask for that pillow back. Thank you. And if you don't mind, Annie, could you take these thumbtacks and just stick them all over your chair and then have a seat? I mean, I want to make this real. We want this to be real, right? Oh. All right, here's what we'll do. We'll just set them right there as a reminder. You're in pain, you're in agony. All right, got it. And if you're asking yourself, well, what is going on? Why? Does this seem fair to you at all? No, it doesn't. It doesn't seem fair. And that's the problem and also the purpose of this book, to really bring to mind that whole, wait a second, how in the world could somebody who has tried to live a right life, a good life, end up this way? And we ask this question too, don't we? When we get suffering in our life that we didn't cause, I mean, if we caused it, we know. But if we didn't cause it, and it just happened to us because life is hard, we start asking the question, why? And that's what Job started wrestling with. What's going on? Why is this happening to me? And it's something you might have already asked so far. I mean, you've had classmates who probably have turned on you at times, and we've all have done that, right? School's a hard place, and if you're in a workplace, it's a hard place. And if you have a family, it's a hard place. There are people that turn on you, and there are people that you just don't understand why this happened to me. And that's really the big question for Job. Why is there suffering? Why do we have to suffer when we didn't actually cause it? Now there's good news, because Job, you actually did not lose your wife or your friends. So you didn't lose everything. Yeah, so that's good. Except Job's wife wasn't all that encouraging. In fact, she looked at your condition, your tragedy, and she said, why don't you just curse God and die? That's not the most encouraging thing you've ever heard in your life. No. And so the friends, at least, that's good, right? You got friends, and friends should be encouraging. Friends should be helpful. They should show up in your time of need, and they certainly did show up. They just didn't show up to encourage you. They showed up and started questioning you. Well, wait a second. If all this is happening to you, Job, then something must be wrong with you. And you would defend yourself because you know you didn't do anything wrong, right? Here's the reasoning that the friends would use. They would say things like, well, if God is just, that means he is always going to do the right thing. Justice means he's going to do the right thing. He's righteous, meaning he's going to do the just thing. The two are interchangeable. God always does what is right. But Job is suffering, and that creates a problem, because it can't be God's fault that Job is suffering if God is a just God. So the friends are going to spend a whole lot of time trying to convince you, Job, that it is your fault, that you did this. Even though they can't necessarily even pinpoint exactly what it is you did. I mean, they look at your life, they're like, yeah, you do seem like a blameless guy. You seem like a righteous guy. You seem like a good guy. But, look, the facts don't lie. God is just. He can't be at fault. You are suffering. You must have messed up somehow. That's the reasoning these friends will use. And if you read through the book of Job at any point in your life, or if you read it this past week, then you read mostly these friends trying to convince Job that he messed up somehow. He must have sinned in some way. He must have erred on the truths of God and made a mistake that is causing this pain in his life. It takes a lot of stamina to get through the book of Job reading that kind of argument when at the very beginning of the book it says he's blameless. The whole book sets up the premise that this guy isn't at fault. But I mean, if we're just using our illustration, who is it that took away your candy? I did. Who is it that took away your money? I did. Who is it that took away your pillow? Yeah, but if I'm playing the part of God here, by the way, nobody here actually believes I'm anywhere close to that. If I'm playing that role, then it can't be me that is the reason for taking it away. I always do what's just. I did the right thing by taking it away from you. The only conclusion must be that you are a dirty, rotten sinner. See how quickly they turned on you? So this creates some problems, and Job himself starts wrestling through this problem. It doesn't make sense because he wants so badly to believe that God is just and that he operates the universe out of justice, that he's always going to do the right thing. And if Job himself is suffering, something must be wrong, but Job knows his innocence. Here is this. I want to share with you how the writer of Job paints the picture that Job is a just and right man. First of all, he just admits it right up front. He also has God himself say, "Have you considered my servant Job, who is blameless, my righteous servant?" God himself declares it. And then it tells us that Job would often offer sacrifice for his 7 sons and 3 daughters, sacrifices for sins he didn't even know if they committed. That's how righteous he is. He just wants to make sure they're good. Julie, have you ever offered sacrifices for your children? No, we don't do that anymore because Jesus fulfilled that. But even if we had that system in play, nobody does this. But Job does this because Job is blameless. He's not at fault. And so the only conclusion Job can come to is that something must be off in our understanding of God. So Job himself starts to question, maybe God doesn't always operate out of justice. Maybe God himself isn't totally just. And then he repents of those thoughts because those are just awful thoughts, and he wrestles with this. You're a pretty smart dude to be wrestling through all this stuff. Yeah. And you're trying to figure out God. And then you start to actually question God because you know that you didn't do wrong, but you need to make your case before God. So almost like a court, you go before God to present your defense. And if you don't mind, since you're playing the part of Job, I'm going to let you read the questions. Now, these are just samples of questions because it's a very, very long section where Job just asks question after question after question where he's declaring his innocence. So if you need to stand up, you can, but here's going to be the questions for you. Just don't knock over the table. Yeah, there you go. You know what? I didn't even get you a mic. I'm so inconsiderate. There you go.
Is this me?
Yep.
If I have walked in falsehood or my foot has hurried after deceit, let God weigh me in honest scales, and he will know that I am blameless.
Okay, and there's more.
If my steps have turned from the path, if I have denied the desires of the poor, if I have kept my bread to myself, if I have put my trust in gold, if I have rejoiced at my enemy's misfortune, let the Almighty answer me.
So basically what you're saying is, look, if I've done anything wrong, God, you have to tell me. He's actually forcing his case before God. You are responsible to tell me. Because look, I don't deserve this. I don't believe I deserve that. I don't think I've done anything wrong. But if there is something I've done wrong, then you better present it before me because here's my defense. I'm going to let my case stand. Now it's your turn, God. Now, if I've not done anything wrong, then you need to tell me what in the world is going on, because I'm suffering like crazy. I have lost my children. I've lost my business, my farm, my fortune. I've lost everything, and all I have is a nagging wife. I've lost it all, and it's even worse. And so he presents this to God as his case. And God finally answers Job. And I'll go ahead and read this part. Who is this that darkens my counsel with words without knowledge? Brace yourself like a man. I will question you, and you shall answer me. Where were you when I laid the earth's foundation? Tell me if you understand. Who marked off its dimensions? Surely you know. Who shut up the sea behind the doors when it burst forth from the womb? When I made the clouds its garment and wrapped it in thick darkness. Now I stopped there, but this questioning goes on and on and on through a few chapters. I mean, it's just, God is just laying out. All right, here's the deal. You're going to come before me and you're going to question how I operate the universe. So let me ask you, how much knowledge do you actually have of the universe? And he goes back to creation and starts going through everything that he's created and saying, were you there? Did you create these clouds that are able to open up and pour forth incredible volumes of water? Do you hold back the sea? Do you tell the morning to rise? Do you know how it actually works that an animal is conceived and given birth? And he goes through everything until, just almost to exhaustion. And of course, there's not any of those questions any of us can answer, and certainly Job can't answer, and it overwhelms him. And here's the mistake Job made. And yes, you did make a mistake. I know you're good, and I know you're blameless, but you did make a mistake. It's actually the same mistake all your friends made. It's not that you came to the same conclusion. You came to a different conclusion than your friends did, but both of you made the same mistake. And that mistake is going to be shared right after I read this. The Lord said to Job, I forgot this one, will the one who contends with the Almighty correct him? Let him who accuses God answer him. So now God is asking for your answer. Here's the mistake that Job made. Job thought God could be figured out. Job's friends thought God could be figured out. The problem is that when we try to start to put edges on God and define God and put limits on God, because honestly, in our minds, we're not capable of reasoning beyond the finite limitations of our own brain. Now, some of you have big heads and big brains and a lot smarter than me, but all of us have a limitation. At some point, it ends. We cannot go beyond what we're able to think through, reason through. We're a created being, and what we're doing is trying to understand the uncreated. We're a finite creature, and what we're trying to do is understand the infinite God. And the problem is, when we start putting edges on God and defining God and telling him how he is to behave, we think we can understand him, we think we can define him, and we think we can use him in an argument. We're putting God in a box. And it's dangerous to do this. And so Job concludes this.
Then Job answered the Lord, I am unworthy. How can I reply to you? I put my hand over my mouth.
Why do you think he puts his hand over his mouth? What is that symbolic of? Oh, I thought it was because he sneezed. Okay, so it's not... Yes, I think you're right. I think I'm wrong. Not speaking anymore, because he has nothing left to say, right? Everything's been said. Are you kidding me, God? I can't answer any of those questions. I'm done. How could I possibly answer the questions you've laid out before me? I can't even scratch the surface of them. And this is really the message to the graduates that I wanted to share. It's this thought. You're going to go out into the world and you're going to start a career, you're going to go to college, and you're going to run into friends that think that they have God all figured out. And you're going to run into coworkers who think they have God all figured out. Those that are in college, you know that, right? You've run into those professors, those teachers who have been able with their minds, and their minds are much larger than your mind, otherwise they wouldn't be your professor, and they're reasoning through things, And so your coworkers, teachers, friends are all arguing the same thing, and it is this, that if God operates the way I think God ought to operate, and the assumption there is that I can understand God, I can actually get Him figured out in my head. If He operates within the dimensions of my capacity to understand the knowledge of the universe, then He must operate the way that it reasonably makes sense to me. And people do this all the time. They say, well, if God is good, if God is all over the place in the fact that He's omnipresent, if God is all powerful, come on, if He's those things, there shouldn't be suffering in the world, certainly not suffering of the innocent. But if He can't, for some reason, help out the little baby who is suffering, that never, ever had any sin yet, that's a baby. There's no way that baby deserves to experience any type of punishment. In a sense, the story of Job represents the story of the little innocent baby that is suffering. If God cannot take care of that, because certainly He sees if He sees all, and certainly He's powerful enough to fix it, and if He's good and He operates out of justice, then that baby should not suffer. But if God can't, either He's not seeing what's going on, or He's not power enough to change it, or He's not just good enough to do it. He's not just enough. He doesn't actually operate out of justice. And this is the danger we get in, because what we will do is not only will we start to limit God, and we'll start to make God in our own image. God created us in His image, and then since that day, we've been trying to make Him out in our image. If we put God in a box and we limit God to the understanding that we can understand in our own little small heads, then we have the ability to limit how powerful He is, or how good He is, or how present He is. If He operates within the dimensions of my capacity to understand the knowledge of the universe, then He must operate the way that it reasonably makes sense to me. And people do this all the time. They say, well, if God is good, if God is all over the place in the fact that He's omnipresent, if God is all powerful, come on, if He's those things, there shouldn't be suffering in the world, certainly not suffering of the innocent. But if He can't, for some reason, help out the little baby who is suffering, that never, ever had any sin yet, that's a baby. There's no way that baby deserves to experience any type of punishment. In a sense, the story of Job represents the story of the little innocent baby that is suffering. If God cannot take care of that, because certainly He sees if He sees all, and certainly He's powerful enough to fix it, and if He's good and He operates out of justice, then that baby should not suffer. But if God can't, either He's not seeing what's going on, or He's not power enough to change it, or He's not just good enough to do it. He's not just enough. He doesn't actually operate out of justice. And this is the danger we get in, because what we will do is not only will we start to limit God, and we'll start to make God in our own image. God created us in His image, and then since that day, we've been trying to make Him out in our image. If we put God in a box and we limit God to the understanding that we can understand in our own little small heads, then we have the ability to limit how powerful He is, or how good He is, or how present He is. And what we've done basically is gone all the way back to mythology and created a Norse god, or a Greek god that is made in our image, that's very limited, and that has faults, by the way, just like us. Most people don't even go there, though. They just dismiss God. And so you have very smart people that use their reasoning skills to tell you God cannot really exist. And that's dangerous thinking, because what we've done is we've used human wisdom to dismiss God. The story of Job is about a man who had every reason to go before God and plead his case and walk away without an answer, except to put his hand over his mouth. We need to realize that we live in a world that is far too complex and far too big. We can't even understand everything in the world. How in the world are we going to understand the one who created the world? And what we cannot do is use this human reasoning to dismiss God outright just because He does not fit in the box we've designed for Him. We've got to accept that God is God and we are not, and that God is bigger than we are, and that God knows more, and no matter how much schooling you have, you'll never be smart enough to figure Him out. You've got to let Him be God. And so all we can do is answer the way Job answers.
And Job replied to the Lord, I know that you can do all things. No plan of yours can be thwarted.
Oh, I'm sorry. I have a job too. Go ahead.
You asked, who is this that obscures my counsel without knowledge? Surely I spoke of things I did not understand, things too wonderful for me to know.
All right. And so our role is to... Oh, but I want to back up though. There's a word there that I just love, and it's this word wonderful. You spoke of things that are just too wonderful for me. Think about this. Job has been wondering, how in the world could I suffer when I didn't sin? He's wondering about, is God still just? Does God operate out of justice? Is the world the way I thought the world was? He's wondering all these things. All the friends are arguing with him. They're wondering through these things as well. And finally he comes to the point of, I can no longer wonder just about the mysteries of why there's suffering in the world. I also have to ponder and wonder the glory of God. I have to wonder why there's mercy and grace and peace and love in this world in which I contribute bad things to. We're not Job. Not everybody can be Annie. All of us actually suffer from this problem called sin. Job represents someone who could stand before God and not be blamed for his wrong. We can't. That doesn't mean Job was a perfect man or any of that. It just means he lived a moral life, an upstanding life, the best that you could possibly live. He stands as an archetype of what it would look like if we actually could live a perfect life. And even so, sometimes we still suffer, and still then we need to be just like Job and put our hand over our mouth. So each week, I have for you an I'm statement, and if you're new to the church, we actually have places in our daily reading plan where you can put the I'm statement for that week. After you read that week, you put the I'm statement there in your... I don't think I have an insert this week in your bulletins to put it there, but this is the longest I'm statement. I hope it's the longest that we'll have for the whole year, because this one's pretty long, but here it is. I'm putting my hand over my mouth. There's your I'm statement. And may it remind you as you look back through your book that we need to stop limiting God. We need to stop thinking we have Him figured out. We need to trust that He is going to set all things that are wrong right someday, that there is suffering in this world, and sometimes we can't understand why, but God in His infinite knowledge knows, and we have to trust that He knows and that He'll work it out in the end. Annie, I want to thank you. You have been such a good sport. Well, you want to give Annie a round of applause? Now, Annie, you can't leave yet without parting gifts. Isn't that the way it works? Yeah, so I want to conclude the way that Job concludes, and that is Job actually received back children and blessing and animals, and is actually larger than when he started, bigger blessings. Now, here's what I need you to do, okay? Please don't tell my wife, but here you go. Yeah. Wait, Annie, you're not done. I'm not giving you my pillow, but you can have that too. And the reason why she's getting all of this is not because she's a good girl and she's done everything right. When you get to the end of Job, you have to understand the blessings that were poured onto Job at the end aren't because of Job, but because of God. And the wonder of God is that even though we sin and we mess up, He continually pours out His grace. So if you're going to ponder why is there suffering and sin in the world, you have to ponder why is there grace and mercy even for someone like me who's messed up so badly. That's how the book of Job ends. So if you're going to question God, question Him this way. God, I don't fully understand why there's suffering in the world, especially for little babies and the innocent. But I trust You, And I certainly don't understand why Jesus Christ died on the cross for my sin, because I don't deserve that. But I trust it applies to me and is real and saves me from all my sin. Awesome, huh? Thank you, Annie. So maybe this morning as you watched that and kind of wish that Annie spoke more than Jeff did, you were wrestling with your own suffering, your own pain. One of the realities of life is that this world is temporary and it does not last. And even though the suffering and pain doesn't make sense to us, and it's really hard when you go through it, I get that. But there's all these little hints in life that on the other side of the suffering and pain is something bigger, something better, and that He's going to fix it all. And of course, we know that promise is in heaven. But think about a baby being born, just like the baby that was born yesterday into the Cox family. There's all this, yeah, and Hart family. There's all this suffering and pain, and it hurts. And then there's a baby. Yeah, it really hurts. Some of you heard that. And then there's this joy. The baby comes into the world. The same thing for us. There's suffering and hurting in this world, and yet there's this promise that on the other side, He's going to make all that's wrong right. And no wonder Jesus says to us, my burden is easy, my yoke is light. And you're thinking, but this world is hard. He says, but trust me. In the light of eternity, you're going to look back and you're going to understand. You cannot understand now. Just trust me. Maybe you're here this morning and you've never surrendered your life to Jesus Christ, and you don't fully even understand how the cross actually works and how that could actually apply to me and forgive me for all my sins. Just wonder in that. Just be in awe and wonder of that Jesus Himself has taken every punishment for every wrong and every sin, and you just have to give your life to Him. Isn't that wonderful? And if you this morning, yes, go ahead. And if you this morning want a relationship with Jesus Christ, I'm going to invite you as we sing to just come forward and just share, I need Jesus. Maybe you need prayer this morning. Maybe you want to rededicate your life this morning. We're going to give you that invitation. So we're going to stand. I'm going to pray. The worship team will lead us. Sadie's been doing a great job, her and her team. So they're going to lead us in worship, and you just come. Father God, thank you for giving us a day like today to celebrate you, even in the midst of a message of suffering and pain. God, I don't want to lighten anyone. I don't want to downplay anyone's hurt, and I certainly don't want to make light of it. And God, I don't even fully understand the depth of pain that some in this room have actually gone through. All I can do is point to Jesus, who suffered immense, incredible pain for the promise and the hope and the glory of eternal life. And God, I just want to direct us there to the cross. And if there are those in this room that do not have that personal relationship with Jesus, they would come this morning and just surrender themselves right here, right now. We ask for this in Jesus' name. If you have a decision, come.